All right. All right. I think I'm just going to check and make sure we are live. I press the button. Do you know somebody, Danielle Busey? Okay, here we are. We,
Yeah.
okay, so we are live. There's a little bit of a lag. Okay. All right. Well, it's 7:02. We're only 2 minutes behind schedule. This is great.
That's good. On artist time, like 15 minutes early, so we're good.
All right. Well, for those of you watching, welcome to the featured artist talk of the month. This is part of my membership club that I have. It's a drawing club called Shut Up and Draw, and every month we bring in a guest artist, and this is only our second one, but we were super fortunate to have Adonna Khare join us. I've spent countless hours looking and stalking her Instagram, and her work is amazing, and I'm really excited to share it with you. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, I definitely encourage you to check it out. Maybe while you're watching this talk, she's going to share a few pieces during this, but definitely look at her Instagram account. There's so much to take in. The unfortunate thing is scale is an issue. Her work is so large that it's hard to imagine what it would be like in person. So I would love to see it in person for sure. But anyways, I think what we'll do is we'll start. I will, I'll hand it off to her and let her kind of introduce herself. And Adonna, thank you for doing this, for being here. Thanks for all the time so far, getting to talk about art and drawing. And it's like I've already been so inspired by your words and your insights, and I hope that we can, share some of that with everybody else. And I have a bunch of questions. We might kind of dart around, and hopefully it flows. But there, I definitely have a lot that I'd like to ask. But I also encourage everybody else to type in questions on the YouTube link. I'm kind of monitoring those as we go, and there have already been a few really good ones. So, with that said, Adonna, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and how you came to be an artist.
Okay. Hi. Thanks for joining. Gosh, my name's Adonna. I'm an artist and now a tattoo artist, so
Yep.
different types of artist. And I guess I've always been an artist. This is an excellent introduction. This is Speaking is not my strong suit. Drawing is. But yeah, it's always kind of been in my heart and soul to be an artist, and I don't really know how to exist without it. So yeah, I think what we're gonna do is just I'll just answer the questions as they come up. Then
So okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna jump in, and let me go split screen again. So here's the question I always want to know. Like, at what point did you said you always knew you wanted to be an artist, but like, how far back and what was it that you were exposed to or saw that that inspired you or made you feel that way? Was there a particular artist? You've already name dropped a couple in our previous conversations, Rockwell and Audubon, and are there any others that I'm not aware of?
well, I think as a kid, I didn't have a ton of exposure to museums and art. It was more um, kind of my go-to. Any free time, any time spent, I would just draw. It was just as early as I can remember. That was the way I could express myself. And what I was really drawn to as a kid were encyclopedias and kind of catalogs of animals and plants and the variety of animals and plants that existed. I still actually have some. Of course, if I had thought ahead, I would have pulled some out for you. But they're like, just like the variety of like pine trees in North America and the variety of like maple leaves and acorns and how many different types of finches. And I was just kind of like obsessed with going through and seeing this like massive variety, and like there seemed to be no end to that like expansive nature, and it was just fascinating to me. So I was like completely taken in by just the majesty and it just felt like you could get lost in it for hours. And I would just sit there and draw over
Yeah.
and over again, all these different varieties of birds, and like their beaks were all slightly different for slightly different reasons. And I was just fascinated by that.
Yeah. Yeah. I could totally relate. I think I had, my mom definitely bought the encyclopedia set from the door to door salesman. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the illustrations were fascinating. So does this mean, okay, so are you a nature person, or do you just like do you like to draw and
I'm a
represent
nature
it?
person. No,
Okay.
I'm totally a nature person. I have
All
a
right.
minor in wilderness studies, and I used to go backpacking and built an igloo and cross country skiing and rock climbing and kayaking and desert
Okay.
survival, all that fun stuff. Yeah.
Okay. I've seen, yeah, okay. That makes sense. I have seen a few travel photos on your accounts, so that's good. And I assume you're also an animal person. Like, which of the animals, do you have a bear or a lion at home, or do you have a dog and a cat, or do you have a rabbit?
I did have a rabbit. She passed last
Oh,
year.
I'm sorry.
Fun, fun. Yeah, right now, currently, I have my horse, William. He's 35. He's a super senior. And I have my dog, Ozzy, and we have two cats that live inside and then two feral cats that I take care of. I'm the cat lady,
Oh boy.
feeding all the cats.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we know that you love nature. You've been fascinated with it since you were a kid. How did you how did you become an artist, a studio artist? That's not the easiest path to walk. And did you go to? I know you went to school at Long Beach. I know you studied medical illustration. But can you tell us what your goals and dreams were when you were in college? Did you know that this is what you were going to do, or did this just happen
Oh,
upon you?
like how does anybody? I was like, when I look back in my early 20s, I'm like, I'm just happy I'm alive. But no, I mean, I knew that I loved art, but I actually went into college as a biology major.
Okay.
So I had got a biology scholarship. So I actually went to Long Beach State to go into their biology department. And like 2 years in, I was really conflicted about biology and art. And I ended up switching over to the art department because they had a biomedical rendering program in the illustration department at Long Beach State. So then I kind of switched over to that. And then I
Gotcha.
just kind of didn't find that to be what I wanted to do. And then I just started floating around. And, a short, like 7 years later, I walked out with a bachelor's in art and had I can't curse. I almost said,
I
that,
mean,
no clue what I was going to do with that. It was like,
yeah.
I did it, I got through, and it was like, here's your diploma. And I was like, oh man, what am I going to do with this? So I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it because, I mean, what do you do with a degree in art? I mean, you know, so
You find a way to stay in school forever. You just go back to
that's
school.
what I did. And that is the second chapter that I actually
Yeah.
applied to grad school.
Yeah.
And 6 months later, I got into the graduate program at Long Beach State. And I was like, oh, this buys me some time. Figure something
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. So, okay, so then you graduated, and what happened? I mean, have you?
And same thing.
Okay, have you? All right. So, I mean, what what other jobs? I mean, what is your what's your resume look like? Did you just like go straight into this? Were you? Yeah. How did that all work out?
Well, my job resume would be very you by looking at it, you'd be like, oh, I was a nanny, and then I
Uh,
worked at the housing department as the secretary. The worst front office person. Because part of the deal was like when you got a job at the front office in the housing department, you could do homework because it was for students.
yeah.
But I was like an art major, so it was like painting still life. So I would set up still lifes in the office and then leave notes. Nobody touched this for like 3 weeks. And
Nice.
so then I would like paint, and I was like, oh, I don't even know how I was. I was always confused about transferring phones, to the right person. And so I was that for a while.
Yeah.
And then taught. So
Okay.
in grad school, I got a teaching job on the weekends.
Okay.
So I would teach art on the weekends and then do school during the week and then do my student teaching at Long Beach State and all of that. And then after I graduated, I got a teaching job at a school out here in Chatsworth to be the art teacher for kindergarten through 8th grade art.
Okay. Cool.
And that's what I did after grad school.
Gotcha. What was that experience like? I mean, did you enjoy teaching? I'm always curious to know if that.
Oh, I love
Okay.
teaching.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Well,
Like
and I yeah, and I guess I should have guessed that because you do a lot of I haven't seen any of these, but it sounds like you've done a lot of Twitch videos and live drawing and whether it's on site or in your studio. So it seems like you're trying to connect and reach out to people and share the process and your work. So okay, that all makes sense.
yeah, simultaneously through that, I got my first show. I think it was my sophomore year of grad school at
Okay.
a gallery in Santa Monica. So I was showing part time, and then I was teaching part time as well. So I was kind of doing it simultaneously.
Gotcha. I was just looking at the comments. I don't know who Johnny Five is, but this goes back to art school. I didn't even bother with a degree. You could learn anything on on YouTube. Yeah, I suppose so. I definitely have that's a whole separate topic. But
Oh
I'm
yeah.
glad I went to art school. But I don't know how it prepared me. I actually think it kind of screwed me up as much as it helped
Well,
me.
there's a lot of that, and I mean, we all have our experiences. I don't know if this is about my experience in grad school, but it benefited me in some ways, and it confused me in a lot of ways as well. And I kind of came out of there, a hot mess of
Yeah.
2 degrees and not knowing what the hell I was going to do with it still.
Right. Yeah.
But, it's my experience, my story, so it's hard to separate it out. But it's not for everyone, and that doesn't dictate success or future.
Oh, for sure.
It, it's an experience, and it's
Yeah.
for some people, not for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, so you had your first show, you said during your second year in grad school?
Yeah, so it was about, oh gosh, I don't want to give years, but it was like 18 years ago.
Don't worry about it. Let everybody do the math. If,
Out there
if
on the internet,
um
20
so
years ago.
so what was the work in that show? Did it look a lot like what you're doing now, or was it totally different?
It's in a similar vein. Well, it's like the baby of what I'm doing now. So it was kind of the very start of what is over the past 20 years been my body of work.
Okay.
So animals and kind of like surrealist environments that were inspired a lot by like my wilderness days and lots of busy things going on. Like you could look at it and go in and in and in and in, like
Yeah.
to the drum. So super dense.
That's where all my I tried to when I wrote down all the questions I had for you, I had to curate a lot of them. I'm so fascinated by everybody's process and how they approach art, and a big part of what I like to talk about with people is mindset issues, and we'll maybe get into that a little bit later. But especially because there was something that you said that within probably the first 15 minutes of our first conversation on the phone, and it was pretty heavy, and I mean like really inspiring, and it was about permission, and these days everybody wants to pursue digital art and everything is on the computer, and you're deliberately choosing to not do that. You're using materials that are the most basic art materials and supplies in the world, paper and carbon pencil. So I think I'm gonna get back to the process later, but just know there's more coming. Um, so I think I do want to talk about your work because you have quite a bit of it, and you have a solid body of work. That's the thing that's always intriguing is you already kind of figured out what your, and I keep looking over to the side because I have your Instagram account. I'm just scrolling through all the images. You have this universe. You've created this world. And it's pretty consistent. I mean, there are surprises all the time. There are owls with tree trunks either growing out of their head, or it looks like they're helmets. They're occasionally you'll find Q-tips in the ears of animals. I mean, there's a lot of whimsical and funny stuff. There's a lot of different layers, like you were talking about. But I think the question is like, where is this all coming from, and what do you want the viewer to take away? Is it something is it something like in your mind that's really clear, or is it open-ended for the viewer to kind of interpret what they see? Well, I guess I'll just stop. Let you answer that.
I think it's because I've been doing this so long, and my artwork is all a continuation of the piece before it, because I draw from life. And now what has happened over 2 decades of drawing like this is it's telling stories about life and all of the things that happen and our connections. And the animals have almost become like my diary. They represent certain events, certain people, a certain time frame, certain ecological disasters, certain environmental issues, certain political issues. I mean, it's all wrapped up. It's like I take it, it goes in my brain, and then it comes out in this code. And the code is what's put onto the paper. And so that is my process, and that is what makes me feel like fulfilled as an artist, because I'm taking that information and I'm processing it and I'm putting it out in a way that like helps me heal and move on and process life. And then when I put it out there, I kind of take a step back, and I love for people then to come in and put their meaning into the work and decipher it in their terms. So it's this kind of like, my meaning is for me and it exists for me.
Right.
I don't like to muddy it too much, because I love for my work to mean things to other people and for them to decipher that out of it. And sometimes people will look at it and be like, I connect with that in a way that like my heart feels it. I did one when I was super sick with, in the hospital, really, really ill with some things. And when I came out, I drew an elephant with the house that was falling apart, and it was on fire, and a bird was breaking it open, and it was, it's called Let It Burn.
Okay.
And then a client purchased it who just lost his wife to cancer, and he just saw it. He knew.
Yeah, that's a great example.
That in it, that and it resonated with me, because I was, at the time I was scared and I didn't know if I was going to come through this.
Gotcha.
So I made it in that point in my life, and he put his meaning to it, and it's not less or more important than what I thought when I created that piece.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. I mean, you just answered like 4 of my questions, which I always like to ask if the body of work as a whole is what kind of embodies that meaning, or if individual pieces have specific meanings within them, and you just kind of explain that perfectly. And your work, obviously, as all artists' work, it's autobiographical in some sense. And I think there's so much emotion to your pieces, because most of the animals are looking at you. They are making eye contact. Not all of them, but there are a few pieces. Again, like there's one of your more recent lion ones with the floral arrangement. there's something so peaceful about all this, and like the words that I had sent you, like I think you have unity and calm and harmony and honesty, innocence, hope, playfulness, humor. It's all the things that we really want and need right now. Especially, I mean, if your work wasn't already powerful, it's and meaningful, I think it's especially meaningful at this time. So there's a great comfort in looking at your work. So I just want to recognize that and hope everybody else obviously sees that. But then there's also all this playfulness and whimsy and like the get well soon balloons, and that seems to be a recurring theme, at least recently.
That's my response to COVID and
Yeah.
people that are getting sick and the fear and the anxiety. It's just like consuming, and
Yeah.
we're just like caught in these weird bubbles of like whoever's in your home, and there's this like strange, like we're super connected and kind of forced together and then isolated at the same time, and we can't get away, and it's like
Yeah.
almost that like panic feeling, and that's why the two rams that are like tied together, and it's like can we get through, like literally can we get through this soon, please? And
Yeah, I'm looking at that piece now.
yeah, and so that's just been kind of my funny way of dealing. And I've known personal people that have gotten really sick from COVID, and a couple people that have passed, and it's just kind of this reaction to a year of isolation and not wanting to go. I mean, some of my drawings, and I don't necessarily post those that are really cathartic, that really are dark. And maybe I'll share one with you that I did. It's another Let It Burn one that I did just a few weeks ago. That I
Okay.
did just a quick little drawing that just made me feel better,
Hmm.
because it's just pretty disturbing, you know? But life's really disturbing sometimes. Really, really disturbing.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yes. Totally. Um,
really,
there
really
was
disturbing.
there was something that you mentioned, the let's see. I want to go back to there were a couple of questions that Christian Smith asked before the video started, and I think this is probably a good time to bring it up. He was asking about the fact that you use a lot of endangered species in your work, and there is so much negativity and darkness around elephants and pretty much our role
I mean,
within nature is just yeah.
here. Like, you can pick an animal and it's
Yeah.
be there. If it's not on the list, it's gonna be there.
Yeah, and so yeah, he was asking, he made the comment that your work seems to be more hopeful, and he asked, are you, or are you more hopeful, and does the work help? And that does go back to the catharsis and the personal meaning that you have in your mind while you're creating the work, and then having somebody else interpret it slightly different, or look at it a little bit differently, but in the same vein. So I think that you did a good job with that. But what was and then so he followed up also with another question about, have you worked with any environmental or sustainability groups? Because I mean, I'm in advertising and marketing, and it's like if this work would be such a great way to brand any sort of a nonprofit or a cause or a movement. Have you considered that, or has anybody approached you about that?
I've had a few groups approach me, and I think a couple of my images have been used in some of those. I've given permission to be used in posts and some different types of things for organizations like that. I'd like to do more. I do a lot of fundraising here where I live for the arts programs for the schools and things like that. The environmental issue is definitely something I'm interested in doing more with, but I do mostly gallery and museum work right now, but I'm definitely open to that. And a lot of my work speaks to that. So I'm hoping that, maybe I can do more of that, because it is
Yeah.
obviously such an important thing. And my heart is definitely in that world. And I hope, but by doing this art, I'm also doing my part to raise the awareness for animals and the state of our natural world.
Yeah, for sure. Which, yeah, I mean, how in the world do you how do you work on these? How do you how do you plan the your compositions? How do you begin? How long do these how long do these take you? Do you work on multiple pieces at the same time? What is the deal?
Okay, so this is something that they don't like in art school. I'll tell you that, is that I don't really do pre-planned compositions. So I draw kind of, stream of consciousness type drawing, where I have usually, for the larger pieces, I would say over 8 feet.
Mm-hmm.
I do. Oh, where did I?
Yeah, and if you want to, at any time, if you want to reference or share anything.
I'm not going to show you the mess that is on that side of the studio right now, but for the larger works, I usually start with a concept, and that is where I will use a sock, and like it's filled with charcoal dust, and I'll like kind of block out a composition of the main animal. So see the elephant's a good example behind me. You see how it's just kind of like a charcoal background, and then the eraser on top. And that's how I create my composition for the large works. So I don't look at a sketch, I don't project or anything like that. I put a layer of dust, and then I erase the composition, the main parts of the composition, into the drawing.
Okay.
And then I just move it around until I like it, and then I will actually start adding the pencil to it.
Gotcha.
So it's a great way of like moving things around and not damaging the paper, and like seeing it in space on the paper in real time.
Yeah, that's great. I kind of I did discover that you use a sock. I think I found that on one of your posts, and I thought that was it was pretty genius, because I think I saw you, maybe it was a picture of you drawing on one of the gallery walls, which I love. I don't know if everybody that's watching has seen some of the installations. Again, I have not, but Adonna, in I think pretty much every show that I've seen pictures of, you extend the imagery outside of like off the page, and you kind of continue the scene onto the gallery walls, which it's such a great touch, and it really, I think, creates an immersive experience for everybody. So when is your
fun to do the walls of all these great places?
Do you have shows? Any other shows planned, or what is the world of art doing
now? The world of art has been weird this year, obviously, because of COVID. So most of the exhibitions have been online. I had a show open in Denver in October, and I had a show up at the Asheville Museum of Art that just came back. But it was, people weren't really invited in for large groups, and it was very not the way I would love for my art to be experienced, like just online.
But
things are gonna, I think, start picking up this fall. It looks like I'll be in Jackson Hole, and a couple. I'll post it once it's all situated. But there'll be some more shows coming up this year that hopefully, as we come out of this and get vaccines and stuff, like, we can start experiencing art in person again.
Great.
Which would be awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, I'm jealous that was your answer for how you plan your compositions.
I know I should, yeah.
I'm an overthinker, so I do like 20 million preliminary sketches and then decide, this isn't even worth it, and bail. How do you stay, okay, so that's killer. How do you stay, once you start, how do you stay focused and engaged? Obviously you have a detailed and meticulous style. How do you get through it? It's like, I think, isn't it Hitchcock that he always liked planning and writing and doing all the pre-production for his movies, and he actually hated filming because that was the boring part. The idea was the fun part. What do you do?
Because I love the concept. Like they come to me, like it's always when I'm drawing, the next one will come to me. Yeah, and I love that excitement and that new idea. But yeah, like 6 months into a 20-foot drawing, you're like, oh my gosh, how much fur can somebody render before your brain goes down? So what I've done kind of over the years to mitigate that is I always work on multiple pieces at the same time. And these are small, but the monumental pieces like 20 feet more and plus.
Right. Yeah, I've seen larger.
Because it just consumes. Especially if you're stuck, which is what I do. And when you don't plan ahead and you don't have a composition and you work yourself into a corner and you're like, this composition is just, again, almost another bad word, bad, terrible.
All right.
And you're like, okay, so I spent 3 months drawing this giraffe and now he's got to go. And I'm going to erase it and I'm going to put something else in there.
That's rough.
And that's rough because it's like you're getting near the end and then you come in and then you realize you just erased a month's worth of work because you didn't plan it out.
Yeah.
When will you learn?
Well, maybe the net effect is zero. Maybe all the time that you save not planning, and then all the time that you expend going back, it all balances out. Why don't we think about that?
No, I'm not saying that this is the right way to do it. Don't get me wrong. This is probably not the right way.
Yeah.
So, no one's gonna hire me to write a book about how not to start a monumental piece of artwork. Like I'm not gonna get that commission.
Yeah.
But that's how I work. So. Yeah.
Okay. So. Do you rely on references a lot, or are you just so familiar with these animals since a lot of them are recurring? Like, do you just kind of wing it? Do you loosely look at references and say, oh, this elephant here kind of looks like this. I'm just going to go for it.
I do everything. Like I hoard pictures on my iPad that I think are cute. I mean, it's ridiculous because half of them are like kittens because weirdo. And then I draw so much time, like I've developed almost my own stylized animals. And so then I need the reference to counteract that because then my art becomes caricatures of my last piece. Gotcha. So it's like, then I need to pull in those references to kind of like balance me back out again. But my favorite thing to do is to turn people into animals. So I have people pose as the animal and then superimpose like the animal on top. And that's my absolute favorite way of drawing animals.
So
just have people like pretending they're an animal and then like extending their arms and moving their hands, making them work in that animal.
Okay, so this is intriguing to me because this is one of the questions I had. I only came across, I think, a handful of pieces that are like that. And those are definitely some of the most interesting, especially the two kids. I think they have wolf heads and they're...
Oh, yeah. That is not two kids. That's my daughter.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
gotcha. All right.
That's my daughter screaming at herself.
All right.
Of what it's like to have a 3-year-old.
Yeah, and that piece, I wish there was... I wonder if I could...
That's a piece I never sold because there are a few pieces that are so personal that they are in my collection, and I won't sell them.
That one is, I mean, that one stands out for sure because it's so dark and aggressive and angry. And once I saw that, I couldn't make sense of it with the rest of your work. And that's what got me, that's actually what got me to scroll. Like, I mean, I probably went a mile. You have 559 posts, and I'm pretty sure I scrolled through all of them looking for like, where did the first one of those come from? Like, how did that sneak in? And yeah, how does it play out? Because yeah, it's pretty It's pretty aggressive, but I love it. I love that piece. And I wish I could show that. Do you have a small? Is that in the studio at all?
It's up in storage
Okay.
above me.
All right, forget it.
Yeah, it's in long-term storage until I frame it.
Yeah. So a few people had asked about like, yeah, how do you fasten the larger pieces to the wall in your studio and like in a gallery?
Well, in the studio, it's just pinned to the wall.
Yeah.
On tack. But then once they're cropped, like I crop the edges off before they go to a show, and then they're installed in the shows by magnets. So what we do is
I thought I saw that.
Yeah, in the wall, literally like a sandwich. We lay the paper, and then we put the magnets on top, and it holds the paper against the wall.
That's so smart. And then there was a piece that I saw that actually spun.
Oh yeah, so that actually, the spinning thing's right here next to me. It's like it's. I could show you.
Here, wait. I'm gonna give you full screen.
The mess over here, but see that little circle mechanism thing?
Yeah.
So that was actually anchored onto the wall, and it's like what's it called, Lazy Susan thing?
Yeah.
And you can kind of like rotate it, and that was that just came back from the Asheville Art Museum, and it was meant to be seen either way.
Gotcha. Okay, man. So we kind of dove into we've talked about your work, although I feel like we could just keep talking about it forever. We kind of got into some of the process, and I'm just going through okay, so this is a good one because, and again, you kind of already answered it, but like I got the impression that you did plan out your compositions because they work so well. They're so detailed. I just couldn't imagine somebody winging it or just, I mean, come on. Like there's a piece that I'm looking at there are tree houses and branches interacting with other trees and ladders and
I have that one right here. Is it the owl tree house?
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah, exactly. So like, come on. So you didn't plan that at all? I mean, you planned it on like.
I knew
you just
I wanted
went with
houses. I knew that.
God.
That's and awesome. I knew that. So how I started that drawing was on the left. I drew the first owl, and then I'm like, how many owls can I fit on the bottom of this paper? So I just kept drawing left to right, and I fit 4. And then I was like, I'm going to draw a treehouse kind of a little bit off center. And I was like, okay, so I drew the off center. I should show you as I'm doing this so that I can talk you through that. So then I was like, okay, so I got my 4 owls. I fit 4, good for me. I was hoping to fit 5, but it wasn't going to happen. And then I was like, I'm going to draw this more detailed treehouse. And of course, compositionally, it's not great to put it right in smack dab in the center, right? So I slightly off-centered it. And there was my thought of composition. So I did think about it.
Yeah, you did. All right.
And then I was like, okay, that's going to be my main tree off to the side. And then it's literally like a balancing act. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to add one here, see how that feels. And then I'm going to add one here, and I'm going to see how that feels. And I'm like, okay, that feels pretty good. Then I'm going to start drawing branches. And I'm like, okay, it's too heavy here now. So now I'm going to go over here. And then I'm like, okay, if I put that bear here, I'm going to counteract it with this, the floating reindeer here. Gotcha. And then that's the thought process. It's kind of like a...
Well, it's cool because what you're doing is you're just responding to the previous thing that you did. So there is some... I always want to know what sort of role chance and spontaneity play in the creation of somebody's art. And again, even though there's such a contradiction because the final piece looks so rendered and planned, but your process is not that. So I find that fascinating, and it makes me appreciate your work like that much more. God, I really wish I wanted you to say that you plan them for months and you do millions of thumbnail sketches because God, that's just how I think.
I mean, I do write down and I do these really terrible sketches of like my big concepts. So it'll be like a squiggle and it'll say tiger tied to zebra and that's it. So that'll be like sometimes my head's too full of ideas that I have to like dump them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I just love that when you start to draw, you can respond. And then the best part is when I'm working on something like that and like say somebody calls and I'm like, oh, now I got to draw a wild boar. Or now I've got to like, now I'm frustrated and now I'm going to tie this sucker to the tree because now I feel trapped. Like, so that's the best part is that it's always open for.
Yes.
And that's the exciting part about it.
Yeah, because I mean, if you do try to plan everything, that's not how art. I mean, that's just from my experience. That's not how I think art is made. That's a very frustrating way. If you try to plan it ahead of time, you're setting yourself up for failure. So
disappointed.
Yeah.
And if you think about, and if you just want to use it in broader terms for life, whenever we're set, so like this is how it's got to be, this is the perfect way, you're shutting yourself down to the reality, which is things are going to change, things are going to and sometimes that's better than the original idea, and you're shutting yourself down to that if you're so rigid in your concept.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say sometimes. I'd say most of the time the unintended path that you find yourself on is I mean, it's going to be way more fascinating than whatever your intention was. You can't think a piece into existence, like you can't. There's a lot about art that is physical and again responsive and reactive. So that's awesome. So Christian had asked, have you ever included a human in one of your pieces? Will you? You kind of have, but with the caveat of animal heads.
I usually hide them in the animals. I've done a portrait of my daughter of her whole body face. That's the only time I've actually represented a human all the way through.
All right. So and back to the animal heads. So if that is, you feel really strongly about those pieces, how are you going to be doing more of those? Is there a shift that's going to happen, or are you?
I go through phases. There was a big phase a couple of years ago where all my work was like that, and then it kind of shifted back the other direction. And then right now I'm kind of in limbo with it because I'm trying to find different ways of telling our human experience through animals using like human attributes, but not necessarily just human bodies with an animal head. So I'm working through kind of the growth and this change in that department, and I don't know what's going to come out on the other side yet.
Gotcha.
So we'll see.
All right.
And I haven't thought that through either. No different than anything else.
Yeah. So how are you connected with the art world, and how do you book shows, and how far ahead do you have to plan for those? What is your ultimate? What is your goal with your practice? Do you just want to continue to be a studio artist and do that and enjoy it until the end? Is there something in mind after this? Or it seems like this is a huge part of who you are, and we talked I guess last month, and it's like being a studio artist is extremely isolating, and you've spent a lot of time alone and drawing and trying to ignore the news and and focusing on being creative. But yeah, I'm curious what your plans are, or if you're just kind of, if your approach to art is kind of a metaphor for your approach to life. loosely plan. I'm going to loosely plan it.
I'm, there's been a lot of changes, and there's been a lot of shifts, and there's been a lot of things that have happened over the years, and even recently, where I've kind of just surrendered to. I will always identify as an artist. I always will draw.
Yeah.
I would love to always show, and I have shows planned for the next year or two. Shows usually book galleries a year, museums more, a year or two out. That's usually how long it takes to book. I recently started tattooing.
Yeah, I definitely want you to talk about that, because we talked about that yesterday.
Yeah, I've been showing fine art for almost 20 years. So I guess I'm hit that point now where I'm like, I love it. It's my identity. It's my job, but I want to see what else I can do. And I've been designing tattoos forever for friends, for clients, and people have been tattooing my artwork on them. And finally it got to the point where I was like, I love medical stuff. I love needles. Not in a bad way, but like just in a way that it's like a new medium. Mm-hmm. It's like, instead of a pencil, it's like different types of needles and different sizes. And it's in that same genre. So it was like this really fun puzzle where it's like, I know how to draw, I know how to design. How can I translate it to a brand new medium? And I love it. I think it's fascinating. And I think it's the ultimate like choice for somebody to choose you to put something on them forever is such an honor. And I can't get over it. And I'm like, they want either your artwork or you to put something on them permanently. And I'm like, it's such an amazing feeling to do that for somebody.
Yeah.
And tattooing has been around forever. I mean, as long as humans have existed, we've felt the need to mark ourselves. And it just makes so much sense to me. And so I'm excited to see where the tattooing goes. I just do it on the side with this, kind of like everything. And we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know.
So Danielle said, I have an Adonna tattoo. She's she's amazing.
It's so cute.
Yeah, do you have any of your tattoo work, any of your demo, your test cantaloupe?
Oh my gosh, I have a frozen of my first grapefruit that I tattooed.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. Well, and your work, it translates it really well, and it is, it's an interesting jump from pencil to tattoos. That's great.
So fun.
So one of the things I wasn't nice. I'm just reading some comments here. And Danielle said you have the penguin. How large is that? So what's the largest tattoo that you've done?
So far the largest was an owl and I guess it would be almost like a half sleeve.
Okay.
I just finished it. I can probably, I don't know. If I show it on my phone, will it show up okay on the screen?
Let's give it a shot. Let's try it.
Let's see. Super high tech over here. Hold on. Give me a Don't be too impressed with my. Okay. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, there you go. Oh, that's rad. Yeah, I mean, see, this is what's cool. I'm always fascinated if when an artist can take their vision and their style and everything and translate it across different mediums. Oh, scoot it over a little to other direction. There you go. Other way.
Oh my god, this is there the opposite. Right, yeah. There we go. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Because the branch has no start or beginning; it just kind of wraps around.
Yeah. I want to go back to somebody else did actually have a question, and I had the same question early on when I was reading. I thought everything you were doing was charcoal and graphite, but then I had read it's carbon pencil, and I wasn't familiar with carbon pencil, but it sounds like there are some advantages to that. Can you just tell us? Yeah. Talk about that.
Over here on my desk. So this is a carbon pencil. Wolf's is my favorite brand, and Generals has a carbon pencil, but I'm not a huge fan of it.
Okay.
Unless they want to sponsor me, then yes. Um, so wolf carbon pencil, and they come in a B, a 2B, a 4B, and a 6B, just like a pencil would be. So the B would be kind of the hardest and the best line quality, and the 6B would be the softest but the darkest tone.
Gotcha.
So you kind of a variety. For my small works, I use a lot of Bs and 2Bs. I rarely use a 6B on a small work because it's just too crumbly. But for the large works, I use almost exclusively 4Bs and 6Bs. But you get that line quality of graphite without the shine. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. You get the tone of the charcoal, but the line quality of a graphite in one pencil.
Oh, that's okay. I'm shopping on Amazon right now. Wolf's carbon pencil. Or Dick Blick, yeah. I guess I should look there first. I'm also scrolling through some. This is really good. We have a lot of great questions. One of the things I think we could come back to, and this is going to be for everybody watching next week. We're also going to do. Here, let me split screen this again. We're going to also do a Zoom conversation with Adonna next Wednesday at 7, and it's gonna focus on permission, which is such a huge topic. And if you're an artist, you already know you have a million things going through your head. You're thinking of all the times that you thought you needed permission to do something or to not do something, permission to fail, permission to make this mark, permission to erase this mark, permission to work in pencil and not digital or paint, permission to not use color. How is this? I definitely want everybody who's here tonight to be part of that call if they can, because I think it'd be fun, and it's more of a conversation since it's going to be on Zoom. And but I think for the sake of tonight, can you just speak to that a little bit, because you said that's played a critical role in your creative work and career.
Oh yeah, and for a while there, I gave myself a lot of slack. I'm like, why do you need permission? And I just kind of let that go too now. But at least in my experience in my career, my big pivotal points came at first with other people giving me permission, and then more recently myself giving myself permission to do these things. And I think between school and society and how everybody wants to put everybody in a category, and if you don't fit in that category, you won't be successful. You cannot it's amazing how much we want to put everybody in this tiny little box, and we want to do it to ourselves and we don't even know it. But the power of somebody looking you in the face and saying, like, just simple questions like, what do you want to do? I mean, if you think about it, that's not something that comes up often.
Yeah.
And some of us are never asked. And some of us don't even know how to answer. And I didn't really even know how to answer the first time I was asked that question. Because I knew how to go to school. I knew how to get good grades. I knew how to go to work, right? Mm-hmm. I knew how to get it done. I knew how to get my degree. I didn't know anything past that because that was never even in the vernacular. That never came up in any classes. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
Like, what's important to you? Because it didn't matter as long as you got your stuff done, you turned it in. And that's a pivotal point, at least in my experience. And I think for a lot of other artists, it's like when you really sit down and go, what is it that I want to do? What is it that I want to say? And it's really a difficult place to be, but it's such a pivotal place. And when somebody gives you permission to do that, it really can change your trajectory. And it happened to me multiple times in my life and my career.
Yeah, and it's probably a question. I think it's.
But,
oh, sorry. I was talking over you. What was that last part?
Oh, no, I don't know how deep we want to go into it because I don't want it to be like on a Wednesday, but.
That's all right. I think it's different when it's a conversation like on Zoom. It'll naturally be different. So we can talk about it. We're about 55 minutes in, which I think is good. I feel like we could go another few minutes here if you're up for it. But Back to what, okay, well, back to what you were saying. I think permission and also asking yourself, what do you want to do? That's not a question you ask one time. Like you kind of almost have to ask that every day.
You have to revisit that. I mean,
Yeah.
and you have to be okay with the fact that you're allowed to change as a human being, and
Right.
what I wanted 20 years ago and what I want now, completely different.
Yeah.
What I'm looking for out of my career now versus 20 years ago, you would think a completely different person. And if I thought it looked into my brain now, I'd be like, that's not me. I would never think that way.
Yeah.
So it's a question that, and then as I think, once you get permission from others, you learn to find that permission within yourself, and that's when you really get to live that life that you think about, that feels authentic.
Totally.
But it's through life experiences. You can't get there without living through all of it.
Yeah.
There's no fast forward to that point.
Um, Ritz commented and said, "I've always felt going to art school gives you that permission, but that I saw that and that was a trigger. That was I had a reaction to that because I went into art school with zero mindset issues, and I left art school like a complete basket case. Like I didn't know what to do. I thought I had to. I just thought I had to create art that was a certain way, and I didn't know how to do that. And again, it had to do with fitting into categories and having all this deep meaning and you know, planning things ahead of time and having this narrative. And there's just, yeah, there's a lot to it. So I, I enjoyed art school, but I certainly didn't leave in the best place. So,
Yeah.
and it sounds like I guess we kind of already talked about it, but it sounds
Yeah.
like you had a similar experience. And
Yeah, and we can talk more about that on Wednesday on what it actually means when you go
yeah,
into an intensive study program like that, and what actually does to you. And it doesn't necessarily, you don't end up necessarily clear. You do
yeah,
end up and absorbing all of these needs and wants from all these other people, and then trying to filter yourself through it.
right,
So it is a different type of process, but it doesn't necessarily give you permission in itself.
yeah, yeah. And I think, I mean, it is a good question. I think if you haven't gone to school yet and you're wondering, do I need to go to art school to fulfill whatever your career goals are? Man, it's hard because 20 years ago when I was in school, I would have probably said, "Oh yeah, you have to do this. That's why I'm doing it because this is what you do." But I think education. I think right now people are rethinking and have been rethinking education completely, especially in light of COVID, and there's so much now happening online. It's it's hard to learn something trying to resort to YouTube to learn how to do something isn't always going to work. It's good for specific things, but I think you still need a mentor. And I think that is one thing that art school's good about, is either connecting with your peers and finding some way to collaborate with them, and then finding that one teacher that changes your opens your mind to all the things that you were unaware of. So there are great things, but it's definitely not a mandated.
I just think it's not a recipe that
Right.
equals success.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
there's many ingredients in it that can contribute to your success if you know how to filter it and still remain true to yourself and your identity through it. So like, yes and no. Like, you need it, and there's plenty of people that don't at all. And
Yeah.
it's up to your own experience, and you have to listen to yourself and what resonates with you, or else
Yeah.
you might get lost in it.
So Johnny 5 is asking, what have you learned as an artist that you wish other artists knew? Or I guess another way to answer that is, what do you now know as an artist that you wish you could have told yourself 20 years ago? I mean, that's a tough one.
A lot of what we were talking about
Yeah.
is that permission. I mean, I'm a super hard worker and I'm a super, like, I will draw till my fingers bleed and I will, like, perfectionist almost to the point of detriment. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't allow myself to really rest and kind of ease into things. It was like show. Like, I never took a breath. It seems like I just came up for air in COVID 20 years later. Like,
Wow.
oh my gosh,
There's
I've
a
done all
world
these
around
things.
me.
And then I'm like, what happened?
Yeah.
And then like I said, I had to reevaluate where I am. And that's when I started just like tattooing. If you ask my 21-year-old self, I'd be like, are you kidding me? No, we're going to be a gallery artist our whole lives. We're going to hustle. We're going to do this.
Yeah.
And then now I'm like, so I think I don't even know if I told myself in 21, I'd be so stubborn. I'd be like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, I wouldn't even listen.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for me because I'm so stubborn and about that kind of stuff. But and I think what I would tell other artists and younger artists is that idea of permission and how important it is for ourselves to give ourselves permission to do what we feel we need to do and to stop trying to fit ourselves into these boxes that we don't fit into. Because there is a huge world out there and there is room for everyone. There are people that only study tiny marsupials in Australia and that is their job and they mark them and they, you know what I mean? These are environmentalists. There is room in this world for everything. So don't think that you have to fit into a tiny category to be successful.
Yeah, that's good.
I think there's a misunderstanding about what success is and what you have to do to be successful.
Yeah. So have you ever felt, I mean, I guess I could maybe guess the answer to this, but have you ever felt pressure to do art a certain way based on a show that you maybe booked? I mean, were there, when you agree to do a show, are there certain expectations about what kind of work that you're going to produce? Or is it really just like, create 6 pieces, here's the space that you have, they could be any size, but the larger the better?
With the galleries that I work with, and because my work is pretty consistent,
yeah,
that I don't get parameters like you have to draw this, and this,
right?
Which has been fantastic, and it's not been every artist's experience, and I need to acknowledge that. But because my work isn't a similar genre, and it shifts, and different shows have different like energies to them and different parts to it. But I've been fortunate in that I work with galleries that are very open to the work that I choose for that show,
Cool.
Which has been a lifesaver. Because again, once you get tagged as something and you want to branch out, there's a lot of artists that struggle then with the new work.
Right.
And they're to kind of be this certain thing over and over and over.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember somebody that was in the gallery world, and that's what they kind of said, told me long ago. It was like, yeah, you got to figure out what your style is and evolve, like develop that. Don't change. The second you change your style, and now you've lost all of your credibility and the history of the work that you've done in the past. And I didn't like that answer, but I get it. It makes sense at the same time. I'm just still scrolling through a couple of. So okay, I want to go back to the tattooing thing because I don't have a tattoo. I've drawn tattoos, but they're just exciting. Even if you're a person that doesn't have any tattoos, they're still the coolest shit to. Oh, there it goes. We went from PG to PG-13. But I mean, there's so much fun, and again, they're so meaningful. But I could imagine. I think you were saying one of the reasons why you're enjoying tattooing so much is also that you get to talk to people. Even if they don't want to talk to you, they have to listen at the very least.
Because what are you gonna do? You can't leave with a half done owl on your arm. You have to listen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've been a studio artist for so long that I've been working in my studio in isolation for, over a decade now. And one of the cool things about being a tattoo artist is that, yeah, you get to communicate with somebody, and generally you're on the same page because they picked you, they picked your artwork, they picked something that made sense to them. So you have that to talk about. And it's just so fun to connect with people and to do artwork that means stuff for them and to find out their meaning in it. And then just to talk about gardening and, vacation. I just love it. I mean, maybe I'm super starved for, human interaction, which I'm not, and I guess I'm not too big to admit it. It's very isolating being, a gallery artist and a studio artist, because this is your day. I see my daughter, and now she's at home with me, so she's been quarantined with me for a year. Mm-hmm. And then I come back here and I draw, and that's it. And even before quarantine, I was quarantined. So there is the reality that it is an isolating lifestyle, and I'm enjoying interacting and kind of getting out there and seeing just new things and meeting new people.
Yeah, you seem like a social person. You don't seem like the typical studio artist. For sure. Unless there's something else you want to share with everybody, I'm just checking the time. We're a little over an hour, and I think we're getting a lot of compliments. Thanks for doing this. This is awesome. Thanks for answering all the questions. I'm really glad that everybody that showed up got a chance to hear this and to see a little bit of your work. I know we didn't really share a whole lot in here, but I think that's okay. I think that's totally fine, because on the YouTube video, I have both your Facebook and Instagram links. Okay. I strongly, if anybody has made it through this without looking at either of those things, please do that right after this is over. Adonna's work, I'm so frustrated that I don't get to see this in person. One day, I will. But it's again, thank you so much for sharing your work and your insights and your thoughts. Is there anything else that you can think of adding, or are we?
I think that's pretty good. You can always find me on Instagram and stuff and ask questions if you have any other questions. But I just appreciate, everybody coming out and taking time to listen. And I am grateful every day for what I get to do. And I acknowledge that every day that I wake up, that I get to be a creative person. And so in doing something like this just makes it so much more special, because I get to talk to people, and also share with other people that it's important to them too. And I think a community is so important.
Absolutely. So yeah, and I mean that's what art is. Yes, there's the personal, there's the reason that you're making it, but then there's also a huge component of sharing your work. It's a huge motivator to make it, to connect with people, and I think your work does that. And again, it speaks to it's the perfect escape, from the world. I think if we could all have a room of your artwork in our house, and anytime we got frustrated or pissed off or angry, which these days, especially if you have kids in your house, if your whole family is stuck in the house together, there are some strong emotions. But I could imagine your work floor to ceiling and walking into this room and just releasing that negativity and feeling the calmness in your images. So I mean, there is something powerful in what you do, and I hope you keep doing that, and now I hope you keep doing that and tattooing people. So, all right. Well, thank you again so much. Again, thanks for everybody who joined us. And this will be available to watch as a replay as well. So if anybody is came in late, you can catch the whole thing afterwards. So thank you again, Adonna.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
Okay. You too. Good
All right.
night.